This is a quick video on how to use Illustrator if you're working with textiles. It's a great program for designing quilt patterns, fabrics, templates, files for cutting or embroidery systems, and it's also great to use if you're publishing a written pattern or producing a PDF to sell. So let's jump right in. This is what you'll see when you open Illustrator, and you can either select a few preset templates or go to some that you've recently created. But I'm going to go ahead and say New File. And I'm going to change it to inches, since that's what we use most of the time in the US for quilting. And I'm going to make it big enough that we can do a small quilt. So I'll say 60 by 60. So you can create a file size of any type. And this is what it's going to look like. There's a layout to your screen, and it's easily adjustable. So if I go to Windows and Workspace, there's choices, and I tend to use this printing and proofing, but you can experiment with the different ones as you kind of explore it and determine if one is better. It always comes up at whatever you set, so it's also infinitely customizable. But for now, I'll go with the printing and proofing. And you can see I've got a toolbar over here, and we'll go over some of these tools. The most important thing to realize about Illustrator is that nothing happens unless you have a tool in your hand. And so right now it's showing this black arrow, but you can see that I can't do anything to the screen until I go over here to select a tool. So let's start with this rectangle tool. If you hover over it, it tells you what it is and gives you a little tutorial on how to use it. So we'll come over here and draw a rectangle. And this, going back to the selection tool, you can see that if I click on it, I can move it as a whole unit, or if I hover over these corner handles, the cursor changes and I can make adjustments over it by using these handles on the side. The direct selection tool, the white arrow, will choose just a portion of the shape, and so now if I grab this, I can move the one corner and it doesn't affect the rest of the shape. So you'll use these tools a lot, but they're used for very different purposes. Another tool you'll use a lot is this pen tool. And so if I hover over it, again, it tells me the name and shows me how I can use it. But there's a little arrow in the corner of it. If you click that, this tear out menu comes out, and you can actually put this in a separate spot on your screen by going to the arrow at the far right. So if I click on that, now I have a separate little toolbox that I can dock anywhere on my project, and these are tools that I use all the time, so they all four show up. When you do select a tool in the toolbox, when it has this little arrow, it will show as the last tool you used, and so you might look at this and think that you've lost tools, but you just hover over this little corner arrow and they're all right there. So I'm going to go back to the pen tool. To use the pen tool, you can click with your left mouse button and draw a dot, and then if I click and hold it down, I can shape it. In this, I have a fill set and a black line stroke, and that can be changed. So you can draw your shape, and then if I go to the fill here and change it to no fill, you can see it has the line drawn. So it's a useful tool, but it takes some time to get used to in a lot of practice. So continuing on with that particular toolbar, you have a add an anchor and remove an anchor, and then an anchor point tool. And again, these are used quite frequently. So to get a triangle out of this square, I would go to delete anchor, and I would click on one of the corners, and that gives me a perfect triangle. Control Z undoes whatever I've just done. If I wanted to further adjust part of this tool, I would go on and add an anchor, and now if I wanted to, I could select that and change the shape as much as I wanted. This anchor point tool, if I grab it and hover, it gives me handles that I can adjust curves. And so this allows you to smooth things out and draw in a whole different way. So this is a set that I use all the time. I recommend that you go ahead and pull it out. If these two tools are not showing on this because you've selected a different screen view in the window, you've picked a different workspace, then you can add those tools by going down here to the three ellipses and click on it and then drag it into the toolbox that you want it associated with. And you can choose the add and remove anchor tools and add that to your pen toolbox. You'll frequently want to move around your project in Illustrator and zoom in and out, and there's a couple of ways to do that, but two of them are right here. So the hand tool, if you select it and you use a left mouse click to push down, will allow you to move your workspace like it's a big piece of paper on a table and that you're moving with your hand. This magnifying tool, you can zoom in. So if I click and hold from the upper left to the lower right, it zooms in. And if I move the mouse the opposite direction, it zooms out. You can also modify these tools by holding your Option or your Alt key on your PC, and it will give me zoom in or zoom out. You can see the mouse change. So I can click that and be hands-free. There are a lot of keyboard shortcuts that you can use in Illustrator that really speed up the process. For instance, if I have been using my rectangle tool and I want to change it without going to the toolbox, I can just hit the letter H on my keyboard and it changes to the hand tool and I can move around. And so to get to these I'll put this link in the handout that comes with this course, and it will take you to this website where all these keyboard shortcuts are listed. I've given you the main ones in the handout that we'll use the most, but these really do kind of speed up the process as you're working along. Some of the keyboard shortcuts that you'll use the most, one is Control-Z, or Command-Z on a Mac. And if you do that, it removes the last thing that you did or reverses to the last thing that you did. Shift-Control-Z is to redo. So I'll hold that, Shift-Command-Z on a Mac, and it puts it back. So that's called redo. If I want to cut, Control-X or Command-X removes it. If I want to paste it, I'll go Control-Z or Command-Z to get that back. If I want to copy it, Control-C or Command-C, and it makes a copy. Control or Command-V, and it copies that and pastes it in a different area. The paste tool. If I want to copy something just in place, which I do a lot, I will go Command or Control-C to copy it, Command or Control-F to place it in place, and that stacks it right on top of the original, and we'll be using that function as we're drawing blocks. It's frequently really helpful to have rulers and guides that you can use while you're drawing. And to do that, you'll go to View, and I'll go down here to Rulers, Show Rulers, and you'll see that these rulers have shown up along the side of my project and along the top of it. And guides, I can actually touch the ruler and drag down, and it will bring a guide down if I wanted to try to align things to that particular guide, or touch this ruler and bring it over if I want to align things to that guide. And so you can get to guides also by going View and Guide, Hide or Show Guides. So there's multiple ways that you can do anything in this program. When we set up this file, I selected inches, so these are actually showing inches. If they're showing a different form of measurement, you can right-click on the guide and choose whatever it is you like. Feet, inches, yards, millimeters, however you want to be designing. You can change those on the fly by just right-clicking. You can choose what panels that you want to show on your screen, and that's these sections over here. I can move them around by grabbing the top if I need to get them out of the way. I can close them, and I can bring them back by going up to Window. And for instance, I'll bring on Color, click on that, it gives me a panel specific to that. If I want to move this into another panel, I can grab on the tab and bring it up, and now it's docked inside this. So again, everything is, completely customizable. If your screen doesn't look like mine, don't worry about it. Chances are you just need to come up to Window and choose that particular panel. So I will choose, let's do links, and it will bring in that panel. I can get rid of it if I'm not using it a lot just by hitting that X. So you can always move these around and use them the way that it makes sense to you. There's lots of different ways to draw in Illustrator. I'm going to go over here and select the rectangle tool again, as we used earlier. And if I draw, it will be a rectangle. If I hold the Shift key down, it constrains it to perfect measurements. And so I'll do that. I'll use the little arrow at the corner, choose the ellipse tool, hold Shift key down, and it will draw a perfect circle. So again, you've got those modifier keystrokes that you can use. Now on here, maybe I want to change this to a different color, so I can pick a different color. The color picker here might look differently if you had selected CMYK versus RGB. And so again, if the appearance is different, there's always ways to get back to what you want. So we'll say OK. And then I can choose, this is my fill and my stroke color. I can switch those with this little arrow to where now it's got a green line around it, or back to where it is a fill. I have to select it first and then switch it. So you can change the appearance of these different items. There is in that box other tools like a star tool. And so I can come over and draw a star. And if I want to specify how many points, I double click with it first, and I can change the number of points or the size of the radiuses of the inner point versus the outer point here, and it will draw exactly what I want. So lots of different ways to do that. Another way to draw is to choose your pen tool, and you can click, and you always want to close that shape by hovering over the start and the end so they align. You get this little 0 next to your pen tool to tell you that that is a closed shape, which is what you want if you're ever going to be doing offsets for templates or to fill an item. Another tool that we'll use frequently is called the eyedropper tool, and that is used when you want to change the attributes to something else that's already designed. So in this situation, I've chosen the green circle, and I go to the eyedropper tool to select it, and I want to transfer the attributes of this blue square to that circle. So I click on it, that's my second click, and it changes this to match the attributes of the square. Another way to edit any of these shapes is to select it and right click. You have all these options available. For instance, if I want to transform this circle and scale it to 50%, I can type that right in here and say OK, and it's going to actually adjust that perfectly at 50%. Those same options are over here on one of my dialog boxes. So I can say transform and go in and adjust the measurements here. If I want to transform this using this dialog box, then I can type numbers in here. This little chain links will allow me to either constrain the proportions or leave them alone. So if I have the link done and I change 1 to 5, it should automatically change the other one to 5. If I have it where it's got the line through it, I can adjust those individually. So we'll use this a lot when we're drawing blocks. Another item I use frequently in Illustrator is called layers. And if you think of layers, they're like a stack of transparencies. So clear plastic sheets, and you can change the order that they're in. You can hide them, and I'll show you a little bit about what I'm talking about here. So I have layers over here, and I can hide one and look at another. I've named them. So This is my outline drawing of this little corgi. And here it is with a fill in it so you can see the actual colors. And then the templates are up here. When you're working with layers, you want to make sure that you have the layer you want to work with highlighted in addition to it being the visible one. And so if I have this one highlighted and want to try to draw on it, it's going to not allow me. You can see that there's a little circle with a line through it on my pen tool because I'm not viewing the layer that I have visible, or I'm not working in the layer that I have visible. So I have to go up here and select that, and then I can do whatever I want to draw in it. Again, there's multiple ways to get to the same result, but let's start in by drawing a quilt block. So I'm going to go to my shape menu, choose my rectangle tool, hold my shift key down and draw a square. When I'm working with quilt designs, I tend to work with them with no fill at first because otherwise it's easy to overlap them a little bit and not have the accuracy that we want. So I'm going to work with this right now just as line work. So I'm going to come over here and change this to a 2-inch square. And I have that little chain link so it adjusted it and constrained the proportions. So now I have one square. To build them, accuracy is always really critical to me. So instead of moving things by eye and trying to align them, I actually will use the transform tool. So I'm going to select this, Control C to copy, Control C to copy, Control F or Command F to paste. And so I have a copy on top of the original, and I'm going to right click and transform and choose move. And these were 2-inch blocks, so I'm going to move it horizontally 2 inches and not vertically at all. So boom, it puts it right in place. And so now this is a perfect 4x2 shape. So let's do that one more time. Control copy, Control paste in front, which is F, and I will move it again. So we've got the beginnings of our block. Now I'll select all three of them. Control copy or Command copy, Control F or Command F to paste in place, and let's move this to vertically. So 0 horizontally and 2 vertically. And repeat that process to move it again. And so we have a 9 patch. Now I can select and hold my shift key down, and I'm going to try to select this middle one, this upper corner, this corner, and I'm going to give all of those a fill. And so we've got a 9 patch block, and you can fill it with whatever color you want. At this point, I'm going to select the whole thing, marquee the whole thing, right click and group it. So when I move one of them, they all come, so I don't accidentally knock them out of position. And you can see I have a perfect 6x6 square here. So let's do this. Let's draw a rectangle, holding the constrain key down, and I'm going to change that, or the shift key for constrain, change it to 6x6, and let's not have a fill in that. Let's just leave it white. So if you want to try to move these around and use your smart guides, you can do that, but I'll double check and make sure that is 6x12, so it is very accurate. So we have designed our first block pattern. I'm going to scoot it over here and Control or Command C, Control or Command F to paste in place. And now I'm going to transform and move this 12 inches horizontally, 0 inches vertically. Now let's go ahead and just do this one. Well, let's do both again. And I'll teach you shortcuts to this in a future video, but we're gonna, for now, go ahead and use these particular techniques. So we've got the beginnings of a block. So if I Control or Command copy, Control or Command paste in place, and now move it vertically 6 inches, which is the height of the block. And now I'm actually going to move it horizontally 6 inches to offset them. I'll take this one and put it over here using my smart guides. Let's remove these two. So I've selected them all, Control Copy, Control Paste, right click, transform, move. These are now 12 inches high, so I'm going to move them 0 horizontally and 12 inches vertically. I'm going to select this middle one, Control Copy, Control Paste in place, and move it that same 12 inches, and I have completed my quilt block, or my quilt, the central part of my quilt. So everything is perfectly aligned, and it's at the actual size. So if I select the whole thing, I know that this is a 30 by 30 inch quilt, and I can add borders. So starting with the rectangle tool, I'm aligning to where the anchor shows and bringing this up using my smart guides. And so let's do 4-inch borders. Oop, I had that constrained. Go back to that. The height I want to change to 4. And I'll use smart guides to align that. Again, copy and paste in place. And I'm holding my shift key down to drag it down here to the bottom, and my smart guides to align it. So I could repeat that process. Let me zoom out a little bit. Here, 36, and I want to change it to 4. And then again, smart guides to align. Control Copy, Control Paste in place, or Command on a Mac. And I'm holding the shift key down to keep it horizontal, and I can come over and use the smart guides to know that I'm aligned over here. So we have an entire quilt that has been easily designed. Now we'll use the layers, and so I'm going to double click on the name of that layer and overwrite it and call it Full Quilt. And now I'll select kind of a sample of each block. And copy, and I'm going to create a new layer, which is the little plus arrow down here. Hide the first layer, Control V to paste those. I don't need this one. And what I'm going to do now is my templates. So I can move these over, and we'll go into more about this as we're working on layouts, but I want to ungroup this at this point, because I just need one of these squares. Actually, I'll pick the one without a fill. And if you go Object, and down here to Path, and then Offset Path, I can put in 0.25, and it gives me my piece with seam allowances that I need for my 9 patches. And I group that, so if I do want to move it, they come together. And then this one, same thing, Object, Path, Offset Path, and it stays at the last setting. So I'll say OK, and I can do the same thing by selecting both of these, Object, Path, Offset Path, and I have all of my cutting sizes. So going back to transform, I need to cut these borders at 4.5 inches by 38.5. This one would be 30.5 and 4.5. So you can see it's very easy to do this and very accurate. So that concludes our introduction to using Illustrator for designing a quilt pattern. In future videos, we'll dive into some other projects where I'm sure you'll find this program to be very useful. Thanks for watching.